These 3 notes tell the whole story of the Avatar. In fact, it can be found within every episode of the series. Well, maybe because it's in the opening theme, but also because it's practically everywhere. The Avatar is a special show that made way for other cartoons and shows in the future. One of the main things it did was the introduction of movie film scoring techniques related to music and bringing themes into a kid's cartoon. The music in Avatar goes almost as deep as the lore and world building, and today I'm here to prove it to you. In preparation for this video, I wanted to rewatch all of the show, but maybe it was arrogant for me to think I could suddenly binge watch 3 seasons of episodes while working and studying in the university. I was able to get through the first season though, and partially through the second season. And man, rewatching this show after almost a decade really puts a lot of things in perspective. Like, you know, how Katara, little boys ain't so much in the first season.
One's in love.
Well, stop teasing him, Sokka. Aang's just a good friend, a sweet little guy, just like Momo.
Or how well written of a character Sokka is in the sense of being a non-bender but still being able to contribute and not just being a pest. At least, you know, most of the times. The biggest thing that I noticed though was the involvement of the music in establishing and elevating the story and the characters. This is due to some techniques actively used in film like parallelism and diegetic music. But before we get into that, we have to talk a bit about the history behind the production of this music to understand the intentions of the creators. And also, no, I won't talk about the live action because some people are grumbling about, you know, everything that gets adapted and don't want to even acknowledge the existence of such things. Okay, maybe I'm some people. The music and the sound effects for the Avatar was made between a duo of Jeremy Zuckerman and Benjamin Wynn. They were kind of a, you know, business team together, with Zuckerman taking care of most of the music and Wynn taking most of the sound design jobs of the show. It seemed as if they were almost, you know, destined to take upon this role of creating music for the Avatar. This is one of those situations where connections are shown to propel someone's career, especially when it comes to things like composing music for a show. Jeremy and Ben both went to school with each other before getting started in their respective careers, and then Ben actually ended up being the roommate of one of the co-creators of the Avatar, Brian Konietzko, who wanted to ask them to compose for the show because he really didn't want to get a big name seasoned veteran composer to write for the show. I couldn't find any big reasons why he didn't want a veteran composer, but I'm assuming it's because veteran composers are often a bit harder to work with in terms of flexibility. And this goes for a lot of fields where you have more seasoned and experienced people. Newer and younger composers don't really have the leverage to just do things they, you know, want to do it in their way. Like, they're just lucky to get the job. But veterans tend to do that whole, you know, I've been doing this for 20 years and I'm going to keep it that way. You know, so they're a bit difficult to work with sometimes. But a lot of times they have great things to add to the series, but maybe they just didn't want them for the Avatar.
I remember at some point, Brian reaching out to both Ben and me and saying he wanted us to do the music and sound design. And he also wanted someone who wasn't like a seasoned film or TV composer to do it. He wanted a different approach. Nickelodeon wanted us to sort of prove ourselves, which is understandable because we didn't really have much of a track record. And so we did an animatic, and then we did the pilot. For the pilot, we both did music and we both did sound design together.
And the cool thing is, Brian Konietzko was actually a musician himself, and was one of the reasons why the show was pushed to use a lot of diverse array of, you know, different instruments. He wanted a soundtrack that could reflect the seemingly ancient history of the Avatar, and with a mix of different instruments from different cultures to try to make something unique to the Avatar to give it its own cultural identity. You know, you have things from China, Africa, and Armenia, and different Western instruments can be spotted within the soundtrack. Like the Duduk for the Blue Spirit theme. Some of my favorite examples from the show are within a more action battle-oriented themes where you can spot some African drums and taiko drums and different types of percussion instruments. The use of orchestral Western instruments was made to increase the overall epic feeling of the show, to reflect the grandness of the storyline. And using the orchestral instruments with the diverse world instruments gave the show an identity. After learning about this, does that make you think more about the type of love that was put into this show? Leave a comment below. The idea of gathering instruments to help propel the concept that the world of Avatar has a rich culture is an example of parallelism. Remember in the beginning when I mentioned this word? Parallelism in this context of the film score means music that directly supports a thematic idea or the concept of a scene or movie. The music is a reflection of what's happening on screen and leverages the audience's expectations to pull them in. This is in contrast to contrapuntal music, which is meant to subvert the audience's expectations by not necessarily choosing music that supports the concept on the screen. An extreme example of parallelism can be found in the older cartoons in the Mickey Mouse era, where everything they did was mostly supported by the score behind it. I think that's pretty cool, but parallelism to that level isn't realistic when you have voice acting and dialogue. Having that much going on would be too distracting from them words. It's really crazy to think about how new music was being made for this show every week. Usually in American cartoons and plenty of other like anime type shows, and yes, I'm calling the Avatar an anime, you just have reusable loops that just get placed in the right place by someone other than the composer. Usually somebody who has the position of a sound editor. But the composers for Avatar were making new music every week for very specific scenes and moments of the show. There's plenty of moments within the show where the music is perfectly placed in time for the moment, whether it's a sudden dropout or having sudden but smooth transitions.
You're gonna fight?
Go back to the healing huts with the other women where you belong. Fine. You want to learn to fight so bad? Study closely.
These aren't just cut up loops or cut up tracks edited together. The music was carefully composed for the moment and changed within the context of the scene. This greatly adds more nuance and depth to the show instead of just playing a track that has a surface level mood. It's really wild the amount of care this kid's show got when it comes to the music attached to it. Aside from the use of diverse instruments, the show extensively used leitmotifs and themes to help add depth to the characters of the story. The main one being a theme for Aang. This theme isn't very complicated. In fact, it's only a couple notes and uses, very basic rhythms, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it's better to have a straightforward leitmotif so it's easily identifiable to the listeners when it's put in different contexts. You can hear Aang's theme with multiple instruments multiple times within a series with different moves attached to them. But I have to admit though, I've been lying to you guys this whole time. See, this isn't really Aang's theme, but it's really the Avatar's theme. Now you might be raising an eyebrow about, what's the difference? And it comes down to the motif's role within the story. The simple and short motif is meant to represent Aang's responsibility as the Avatar, with the biggest moments being those when he's in the Avatar state, or the more subdued moments when Aang has to think more about his role as the Avatar. If it was simply Aang's theme, you would expect for the theme to play when we first discover him in the first time, but it doesn't. The motif's first time being applied in the show is actually in the second episode after the Water Tribe realizes that Aang is the Avatar.
So, you're leaving the South Pole? This is goodbye?
Thanks for penguin sledding with me.
Where will you go?
Guess I'll go back home and look for the airbenders. Wow, I haven't cleaned my room in 100 years. Not looking forward to that. It was nice meeting everyone.
Let's see your bison fly now, Air.
And when Aang starts to understand the trouble he's caused as the Avatar and wants to take responsibility by leaving alone, that's when the theme first plays. You'll hear it with the low strings and you might have to really listen out for it a little bit, but you can pick out some of the notes from it. The second time it's played happens again when Zuko attacks the village and Aang leaves with Zuko because it's his duty as the Avatar to keep others safe. And with the third time playing when he enters the Avatar state for the first time.
Sorry, Katara. It'll be okay. Take care of Appa for me until I get back.
Head a course to the Fire Nation. I'm going home.
melody comes in full energy with multiple instruments playing the same line at the same time. What's cool is how the theme changed a bit depending on the context, right? And the first two times, the leitmotif is just playing in this E flat minor tonality, which helps support the context of these scenes, which is meant to be a bit more sad and sorrowful. When it plays in the Avatar state though, it's slightly different harmonically, right? While the motif melodically stays the same, we repeat from an E flat minor chord to a B flat major chord, and finish off the B flat major going to D flat major. This E flat minor to B major seems like such an intimate harmonic sound to me. The change is only reflected by one note harmonically, so the voice leading is very close, it's very tight. The B flat and E flat minor becomes B, while the other two notes stays the same. It kind of evokes a similar feeling that I get when I hear E flat minor switching to E flat major and I hear those two sounds switching back and forth. The two pitches that move with the chorus also happen to be the same pitches that move between the motif and the melody, and it really helps to connect the harmony with the melody. The B major, in contrast to the E flat minor, sounds a bit more bright and heroic in this minor key, which is also helped by the melody having what would be the sharp 11 in the B major, which brings that oh so bright Lydian sound slightly implied while we're in this B major. We then finish up with this B major going to the D flat major, going to the E flat minor, which is just a slightly different variation from what's usually associated to be a very heroic cadence, right? If this E flat minor was a major chord, then we'd have the Zelda cadence, which is a cadence that I mentioned before in my last video. A big part of this show, especially the first season, is Aang coming to terms that he is the Avatar and holds that responsibility and has to grow past some of his childish tendencies. If he wants to restore balance to the world, this theme can be spotted at any moment in the show where that concept becomes apparent in the show. In moments where Aang realizes he has to step up or when he's in the Avatar state. I feel like if every one of us had a theme for each time we needed to do the right thing, the world would definitely be a better place, you know. If you've come this far, I'd appreciate it if you thought about subscribing to me to help me reach to 1,000 subscribers. Also, if you're in the need of someone to create some original music, arrange, or transcribe anything for you, I'm still offering my services at a discount until the end of February. Link in the description. Now it's time to look at everyone's favorite edgy bad boy. No, not this one. No, try again. Zuko is definitely a fan favorite. His character arc was a very special one and honestly helped to establish a lot of the continuity throughout the whole series of Avatar. So it's only right that the music around him helped to establish that, right? When we first meet Zuko, we just understand him as being part of the Fire Nation. So whenever we see him again, we hear this big brass theme play, which then signals the theme of the Fire Nation. But as we learn more about Zuko and his complicated relationship, it starts to change a little bit. When we first see the Blue Spirit, which is, spoiler alert, Zuko in a blue mask, we get introduced to the Duduk, which is a traditional Armenian double reed instrument.
The Avatar! I am here to tell you that he is now my prisoner!
Nation, just like you. If we knew each other back then, do you think we could have been friends too?
The Duduk, I just said it. The Duduk has a rich and profound history for Armenia and is used to be reflections of the emotions of the people.
The Duduk, the Armenian oboe, is a single or double reed wind instrument, characterized by a warm, soft, slightly nasal timbre. Many Armenians consider the duduk to be the instrument that most eloquently expresses warmth, joy, and their history.
The instrument is very expressive and very emotional, which adds to the inner emotional conflict Zuko has when the instrument is used for the first time. Between him wanting to get his honor back from his father and his nation, but also having those conflicted feelings, realizing that he doesn't really mean much to his father. And then when Zuko cuts his ponytail, which is the signal of his first big resignation from affiliating with the Fire Nation, you can hear the Duduk in the background. After that, you don't really hear the Fire Nation theme play again for Zuko. And then it's switched over for Azula, because she's the one who takes the role that Zuko had in the first season of chasing down the Avatar. But the theme is played a little different, for Azula. Instead of the low brass, it's given some high-pitched instruments to represent the motif for her. And this gives Azula's rendition of the Fire Nation theme a certain haunting quality behind it. Which makes sense, You can't both be sane and a 10 out of 10 baddie. Like, you gotta pick one. And I'm picking Azula every time, So, sorry, Aang, my boy. Another cool aspect to the music of the Avatar is the mix of diegetic and non-diegetic music within the score. Diegetic music just means the music that can both be heard by the characters and the audience. So imagine if a character in the show plays music on a record player. So both the character and the audience hears the music. That's considered diegetic. Now, non-diegetic music is music that can only be heard by the audience. So the usual background music that's only there to support the story and not a consequence of the character doing anything. Because the music for the Avatar is made each episode, there's some cool Easter eggs that's thrown around for the music. A cool one is when Aang opens up the sacred doors in the air temple, and you can notice the notes being played by the shells from the door. Those are the same notes that are being used by the orchestra or the background music behind it. Another cool one is the introduction of the 4-season love song. We first hear the 4-season love song as a diegetic piece of music with Iroh playing it and singing it with his band. But then directly after, almost in a way that signals the romance arc that we'll have after, is used as a love song between Sokka and Princess Yue, with it playing at each of their interactions.
Winter, spring, summer and fall. Winter, spring, summer and fall. 4 seasons, 4 loves. 4 seasons, 4 love.
So, I'm still hoping we can see more of each other.
Do an activity, you mean?
Yes, at a place. For some time.
I'd love to. I'll meet you on that bridge tonight. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I shouldn't have asked you to come here. So they don't have palaces in the Southern Tribe?
Are you kidding? I grew up in a block of ice. It's not exactly a cultural hub.
The really cool thing again is how the song changes within the context. During the moment Yue gives her life back to bring the moon spirit, the way the song is played and introduced is way more somber than the other iterations we heard of it before.
That.
It's my duty, Sokka.
I won't let you. Your father told me to protect you.
I have to do this.
I feel like doing this really helps to add more strength to the relationship that Sokka and Yue are portrayed to have throughout the show, because it's really sudden when you kind of think of it taking place within 2 episodes, and like they're already kind of like each other when they first see each other, but having this theme that ties them together makes it feel a bit more natural. It makes the time when Yue sacrifices herself way more impactful than it would have been without it. I don't know exactly the connection Iroh has to the song, but I think he was just used as a way to foreshadow the music through a diegetic performance, which is, like I said, a cool, Easter egg. I'm still amazed at the lists that were made to give Avatar a soundtrack that feels just as sentient as the characters of the show. Check out my One Piece video if you want to learn more about leitmotifs with Nami's theme.